Hello and welcome once again to another week of college English, specifically Composition 1, Section 5005, with me, Mr. Fowler. I am so happy that you're here today. I hope that you had a restful weekend, but we are officially back at it and ready to go, so let's not really chat. Okay, first up, you should have completed a peer review of project number 2, the analysis. So if you got that project done and you received a peer review from a peer review partner, and you sent them a copy of the peer review for their paper, it should be smooth sailing from here out. That's because this is revision week, of course. Now, I slightly modified that revision because Mr. Fowler is human and he did make an error. I forgot that this past Friday wouldn't be ideal for the dates turn in. Hopefully, you should be able to relax or at least share some time with your family. Or if you're into that sort of thing, it's time to do some services. And now that we're in a new week, and it's the week that's officially starting our final month of classes, we do have some classes in May, but this is the final full month. So we're ready to move on. So let's finish the analysis project this week by using my commentary and the commentary from your peer review partner to help you edit that particular project or help you guide yourself in the editing. Now, something should come up in the editing process that you can't anticipate right this moment. By all means, reach out. Because I'm here for you. I'm here to help you. That is the idea behind this entire editing. Why we do why we revise already. So that eventually you can be ready for publication. Whether that's publication, internet, or this class, or in print later on. You know, if you want to massage an idea that you like as a piece that you can publish somewhere else, either in a literary magazine or elsewhere, you have that option. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want to get across. It is revision week, and the key task for this week is number one, with that revision process by the analysis. Number two, we have a new project that I'm going to introduce today. Project number 3, the Argumentative Essay. I sometimes go back and forth between which version of this project I teach. Sometimes I just teach it as a comparison contrast essay. And the obvious comparison contrast would be between Ready Player One as a novel that we've read and its film adaptation. But I hate to ask students when I can't be there to supply the film for them to watch as a comparison process to go out and secure a copy or look a copy of, even though it should be more available in a digital sense in this digital day and age. Sometimes it can be problematic. So rather than create any kind of problematic issues for students, we can always do an argumentative essay, which is a nice bit of experience to prep you for next semester's 104 or composition 2 class, because that's kind of exclusive focused on the art of constructing an argument. So you'll have a little preview about what's coming up in that section. And then, of course, There's one small project in the last couple of weeks of May, but it's the smallest project you're going to have to write all semester long. It's only 300 words, barely more than it's in the form of a letter. So we'll address that weeks in front. So project number 2, or issue number 2 that we want to get to today, address the project for the argument. Finally, we have some feedback and some reactions to our text that we're covering on the PowerPoint. You also have a discussion to take care of this. So let's go ahead and preview that. You can share screen. There it is. Week 12. So like I said, it's revision week. You do have the final draft of the essay due on April 8th, which is Friday. Sometime within the you don't have to wait. You can turn it in early. In fact, I already have one final draft already written. You know who you are, and I'll get that out to you probably before the end of today. The rest of you, try to make sure it's before Friday. Okay, so yeah, like I said, we're going to take a look at the argumentative project. And then we'll start on the Ready Player One review, chapter 28. And then I want to pause along the way to talk a little bit about Plato and Alexander Cave, because it does relate to next week's discussion. For this week, though, you have a free writing activity. I just would like you to reflect on how successful your revision strategies for the analysis essay were, along with any constructive criticism you received and you during the process. So you might want to turn the actual draft in earlier so that we get enough time to reflect on this discussion question this week. And then for next week, when we meet here at the same Scholar Time and Scholar Channel, please read Ready Player One, chapters 33 to 37. Now, this is the stage of the game where most of the students have already completed it, and I'm going to guess that more than a few of you have probably done it. I know one or two of you reached out to me and have alluded to the completed novel. Now, that's probably new. And for those of you who still read the schedule, I know that there's a chat after this. So if you want to go ahead and read that, please go ahead. I just try to keep the chat to you about 20 pages, and it just so happens this time I couldn't go chapter 3 and read that. So you only have to read that. So if you want to read the whole thing finish this week, I will go ahead next week and do the presentation on story. And then I'll probably have one more how just cover the book as a whole and offer some reflective points that may be of interest or maybe help you and how it has area. That's not the thing. Okay, so I'm gonna cut the video, cut the visual, to use my face, video, okay, as I'm speaking. There we go. All right, and I want to share with you the argument essay. I'm going to get this a bit larger for us. Okay, so as you can see, so far we have completed self-assessment. We have completed the analysis essay, and you've done 2 rounds of peer review, and you got I think you're on discussion question number 9 this week. So we're almost done with our discussion today. And then, of course, you participated by making sure that you were logging out and completing some work each week to keep abreast of what's happening. That leads us to the last 2 items. Argumentative essay about equivalent to or weighted as such in terms of the analysis that you just completed. And then, of course, you have some more work here to do. That last 7% is your reflection grade, the reflection letter. Okay, let's go due date. So, the due date for this essay is going to be around April 30th. Now, this is a little bit interesting because I say around April 30th. You might find yourself more prepared and more eager to jump into this project. So I'm going to give you 2 weeks, essentially, to write this essay because it is long. You can see here it's 1,250 words or more, which is equivalent to 5 pages. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Okay. But let's finish with the draft due date. So yeah, that draft is going to be due at the end of the month. That means we get 2 more weeks of the semester. We've got the first week of May, and then the second week of May is final. The last official week of class is the first week of May. Then things are due next week, so that I can provide the college with enough time to process the grade. So that's coming up. As such, the final due date, the very last day I can take a version of this essay would be on May 13th. And that's because I have to have grades due, I think, by the 4th. So the 24 hours I can grade. But let's not get ourselves into that particular ticket. Okay? Take the proper time to address this essay. And I think if you do that, you'll find that it's a much more fulfilling experience, and I find that the process will be a lot easier for you as a student. So this week we're introducing 3 topics. Next week, I'm going to review some ways that you can affect the source material to build up your essay and find evidence to support your claim. I guess. So that will be next week. And then there are 2 more weeks where we really don't have a specific agenda other than draft and of course peer review. So if you find that you're finishing this particular essay a little sooner, perhaps in the 3rd week or of April, because so far we've only had about a week of drafting time, then you can certainly submit. Here's the difficult thing. We're used to writing on a schedule of about a week. This is a slightly longer paper. So I have 2 choices. I could hold you to a week, and I could have had a much earlier due date this month for the draft. That seems a little excessive to me, but I I don't know what your schedule is. The difficulty, though, can be that because the due date is so far into the future, that students sort of rest on their laurels. Okay, I don't have to see. And then it becomes a put off and procrastination. But like, I don't want that to happen. So I don't know whether you want more time to write this essay or less. And so I always defer to more time because it's time I can. And my rationale for that is just that you would perhaps have more time crafting your essay and more time and attention paid in the drafting process. Maybe the turnaround would be a little bit easier for you when it comes to the peer review elements. So that's my hope. We'll see how accurately that plays out. Okay, evaluation. 100 points again, and you're used to this by this point. 50 points for draft, another 50 for the final point, equaling or equivalent to about 25% of the overall grade. I think it's actually 26. Roughly. Length, 1,250 words or more. I told you we'd come back to this. That's about 5 pages. So how did I come up with that number? I just used the page numbers, the page calculator. You can do this yourself too. You know what? Rather than me around about it, let me just show you. Here's one page. So I'm just going to share this with you real quick. So I'm going to go here to Google, and I'm going to say words to pages. Okay, so we're going to select Times New Roman 12, double spacing, and 1,250 words. These are saying about 5.2. Now, I'm not going to worry about the 0.2, but essentially it's about 5. So, you don't have to worry about that. So, back to share screen. Okay. That's where, what are you going to do to fill up 5 pages? Well, luckily, most of you already know how to do this. I saw several drafts of the analysis essay that were in excess of required 850 words, and you had no problem. The pages was interesting. The key there is that you were able to choose a topic, and that's not something that we're going to completely abandon. But before we get into that, again, just some special elements with the format. Everything looks pretty similar to what you've been used to, except the paper does have to utilize 4 sources, formatted with appropriate in-text works cited or / resources if you're interested in APA. Now, this argumentative essay can be formatted in MLA, to be what we've been used to so far, or APA. So for those of you who are already considering a major or focus after in the sciences or the medical field or something like that, you may want to use this opportunity to practice the APA or American Psychological papers. Another field that you use APA for. That's for the main. So basically, math, sciences, psychology, they use APA. The arts use journalism, English, teaching, I believe, all use MLA, or modern association. But this is another opportunity to spinning your. if you're, and if you would like just a little more time or energy spent on the tutorial, please email me. Let me know so I can ensure that I provide enough content for that. Okay, now two of the four sources, two must, must already peer-reviewed journals. And I recommend that you find those peer-reviewed journals in the electronic databases offered by the college. Now we're going to talk about that extensively next week, so I don't want to get too hung up on that detail right now. But remember, just generally, a peer-reviewed journal is a journal, a really good source because it's edited and printed or published by organizations whose editors and editorial boards are comprised of experts in that field. So if you're writing a paper about physics, the people who edit your papers would not be someone like a pathologist, who's just a language guy. They would be edited by language folks, language personnel, and then they would also be edited primarily by other physicists, people who were professionals in the field who could track your work and show case your documentation is either correct or flawed in some way. Now, while there are a couple of rare instances, like the famous one is the medical journal The Lancet published some information about vaccines and their relationship to autism and the Asperger's spectrum. That was not well edited, but that's a rare exception. Most of the time, these kinds of peer review journals are going to be very excellent. So I'm going to have you sort of dip your toe metaphorically into these waters so that you can get a sense of what a really good source your argument topic is. But only two can. The other two can come from Google Scholar. They can come from another database. They can come from, and be cautious about Wikipedia, but they can come from there if you think it's a good source. Wikipedia is not great as a source, but the links at the bottom of the Wikipedia page can be great. Don't necessarily neglect the links at the bottom of the page. But for basic information, familiarize yourself with it. Okay, so those are the formats. But what is it I'm actually asking you to do? So briefly, in this assignment, you're going to demonstrate your ability to develop a that's a direct response to one of the larger themes discussed in the semester review. Now that could be Ready Player One, but also it references the little sub-briefs that I've assigned throughout. You will develop the essay in response to one of the articles found in the desired course website. So already you have a built-in resource that you can use from the class. So you've already started to, you already got a kickstart, so to speak. You've got one article that you can use, and you're going to say, okay, based on Jasmine Fox's discussion of social media, I'm going to go ahead and suggest that she's right, that we are faltering in our ability to communicate in a real world, person-to-person setting. Our skill sets are diminishing because we spend so much time online. And then you're going to argue why you feel that way with persuasive support those argument, and maybe reference a character like Wade Watts from Ready Player One, who admits in text he has a difficult time connecting people. Probably, he says, because I spent so much time, like most of my younger years, with NGOs. I'd be a perfect example of how to bring the book, and then you have a reference. So you're already talking about two references, one from your class, one from the book. Now you're just down to your two articles that you can use or research using the library. So again, not too far along outside of the realm of something you've already done. Now, once you select that thesis and you begin to develop it, like I said before, you're going to defend it with persuasive claims and support, all while following the structure of a college-level argument. You'll shape the assignment around your personal reaction to one of the concepts we thought and written out throughout the semester. And your thesis will be a result of your own thinking and logic. Your final draft will reflect the mastery of persuasive structures and strategies that you will apply throughout your academic and professional career. To make this a little easier, I've broken it down. So phase one, you're going to select a prompt and list of topics we discussed so far and just pick one issue. So just A or just B or just C, so on and so forth, but not A, B, C, D. A lot of students get confused about this, even though I've tried to lay this out pretty clearly, right? You're going to select a single issue group in an argument. So the entire essay will focus on A, or the entire essay will focus on just B, or just A, or just C. But you don't have to write an essay with A, B, C, and D. That's confusing. So for example, let's say you were interested in video games and video game play and how it changed over the years. Well, you might want to go ahead and read the article, The Addictive Use of Social Media and Video Games, Symptoms of Psychiatric Disorders by Andreessen and others. Then you can consider the question, does social media affect the development of healthy self-esteem and communication skills? Pretty straightforward. By contrast, you might be interested in people or characters more than a thing or an item. So consider, for example, that all of the main characters in Ready Player One had to deal with stereotypes. And they had to also deal with the ways that they thought they would be perceived because of their appearance or their social identity. Define the word stereotype, listing common tropes or versions that characters like Wade, Samantha, and H battle. Kudos to you if you already know H's identity. How did the stereotypes affect you? What types of defense mechanisms do they use to deal with the stereotypes they face or perceive that they face? Of course, it's specifically about H right there. And how were these stereotypes overcome? Another option here about video games, but this one more focused on issues of economics. Massively multiplayer online games, or MMOs, have generated large market goods that are purely virtual, and which consumers pay real-world money for virtual weapons and clothing in these games. Read Greengard's Social Games, Virtual Goods, and discuss how such virtual goods attain very real-world value and what the risks and rewards are of setting up a business selling virtual goods. This is a really nice article, and you're probably starting to think to yourself, some of these sound familiar. And if you think that, you're correct. And Mr. Fowler's scheme has worked appropriately, which means we probably already talked about to some degree or another in your weekly response discussion. So you've already got a little bit of mention. In fact, you can go back if one of these prompts really clicks your box, so to speak. You might say, yes, that was interesting. I would like to write about that. I can go back and say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and use that prompt response as a way to springboard myself into the writing process. That would be just fine. also be by very careful design of knowledge, and hopefully that works out for at least a few. Here's one if you're more interested in the physical spectrum of interest. In chapter 19, Wade mentions the sedentary lifestyle and comments about how it starts to catch up. Define the term sedentary and describe the potential health risks associated with such lifestyle choices. How does our time spent in a virtual realm, like the internet, with video games, and basically watching television, affect our physical health? How does it impact our mental health? And what can we learn about healthy choices based on Wade's approach? Here you can use Ready Player One as a source. Okay? That would be your one source that you can, just as Doomguard, social games, and virtual goods is a source, and rest again, here Ready Player One is another is the source for this. The book is the source for this. Okay. The novel takes place in the future where many problems that face the world stem from extant issues dated to the publication of 2011. So I would read author Matthew Simmons' Shock to the System and explore how our hunger today for energy consumption continues to spiral out of control despite an overwhelming awareness of it. So if you're interested in environment or environmental studies or just science in general, right, this might be a topic that you. And then of course we have and then Ready Learner One by Saba Oscar. How does the virtual education discussed in our novel differ from today's novel? Of course, in the wake of the pandemic, with all of the major forms of education going online to some extent or other, you may be sick of writing. But when I designed this essay topic, it was pretty interesting back then. Now it's a little more practical than perhaps you would like it to be. How does the virtual education discussed in the novel differ from today's courses? Which of the two teaching models do you think provides a more authentic learning environment for students? How could each of these models more closely simulate the experiences in face-to-face class or traditional class? And is a simulation of a face-to-face classroom a role for which we should even strive in the first place? Provide evidence for your particular. Okay, and last, if none of these things are compelling, those are great ideas, but I really wish we could write a paper more in more detail about a topic that we brought up during the discussion course. There was a moment in the PowerPoint that followed that we alluded to, really caught my interest, or really got me. Great. You can propose an alternative topic. All I need you to do for the alternative topic is write down a short paragraph, an average paragraph, 5 to 8 sentences that addresses the concept from the book that you'd like to write about. I should say here, from the book or the class you'd like to write about. Now, the concept itself can be fairly wide-ranging, but if you can connect it to one of the articles, either the ones highlighted on this page or the articles that you read as a consequence of the research, that would be just fine. Okay, pause for a second, get a drink. And we're ready for phase 2. But once you conclude that, you selected your topic, I need you to conduct a search for materials using Swishwalkie College's library website. Find 2 suitable sources to meet peer-reviewed journal criteria. You may choose from any of the databases offered. offered by Kishwaukee College via the library's vast office. Now, if when searching library material, you should find a book about your topic. I think this goes without saying, but I'll just mention it anyway. You should focus your argument essay on a chapter or section of that entire book rather than the book as a whole, because that's asking you to complete entirely too much reading in order to digest it and use it as a palpable source for not calculate, right there. Use it as an efficient resource for the purposes of the paper besides phase 3. This is where we should be around the end of week 3. After you've read the articles, try to identify the primary thesis of the author, along with claims they use to support that thesis or those theses. Then, formulate an agreement or a contradictory argument, framed as a yes and agreement or yes but response to those comments. The yes but, of course, being the contradictory perspective. So do you agree with them? If you do, that's a yes and kind of statement, meaning they have a good point. And there's additional material to consider, or there's more that I have to say in terms of expressing my opinion about why this author is correct, or why this point of view is what I do. Yes, but is what you want to argue if you're against their perspective. You can say, they make some really good points, but I think they missed something. Or they failed to consider this other idea or perspective. Then in phase 4, you actually compose the essay, introducing the topic and thesis of the original author, present your thesis as a yes and or yes but response, and then supporting it with claims and logic. Now, regardless of the topic, the outline for your argument essay will appear similar to the following. I stress the word similar to because it doesn't have to take the exact format. And next, we'll look at a student example that uses this very structure. We'll start with a summary of the issue, creating a topic, or maybe a topic, something two that clarifies the issue. It might look like this. In article X, the author claims that the thesis. Another important part of the author's supportive and third element to be, and then you transition to your perspective. This is your yes and your yes but. Kind of a strange place for the thesis to come into for the argument, but I think it's been fairly effective. Typically, a thesis is the last sentence of the first paragraph. But here, I make a different suggestion. Maybe you should put your thesis at the beginning of your second paragraph. This is your yes and your yes but. And then you develop some claims. How are you going to come up with ideas and support for the thesis? And you just kind of preview them. You go into great detail. Subsequently, for your third or fifth paragraph, you provide the reader with evidence or logic that supports one, and then underpin that idea with authoritative support of either interpretation or indirect reference. Maybe you can even bring in a piece of intention, evidence, and then you do the same thing for your second claim. Evidence and logic. The same for claim 3. Remembering the transition to the new thing that is pause and create a 6th paragraph before you conclude. Now that 6th paragraph is a paragraph where you pause long enough to offer what's called a refutation or anticipation of a counter argument. Because when you write an argument, there's a good chance that your reader will still be against your perspective or opposed to what you're trying to suggest. So for that reason, a refutation is a good way to build an argument against their point. Some readers just spend the entire essay arguing with your logic or picking apart your argument is wrong. So to stem that, it's good to go ahead and acknowledge, rather than write a rebuttal essay later, some of the potential problems in your own argument. And this allows you to do three things. You anticipate arguments and look for flaws in your own logic, number one. Number two, you prove to your reader that you have gone beyond just a summary or cursory reaction or response to the topic you write. And number three, you give the reader an opportunity to explain in more detail why you still feel that your perspective is right, even though you don't have a concession that gives them 100%. Right? So you might say you have some good points, but just because you have a few good points doesn't mean you have the best. So what you want to do is look for potential vulnerabilities in your own argument and then address them. Repeat your conclusions and finally transition to the essays for now. And of course, the conclusion is pretty straightforward. You're just going to use the basic pyramid shape. You start with very specific information and expand to a wider base of thought. So you restate your yes and or yes but thesis, re-summarize your claims that you made from the paper, and then you draw the essay to a close in a wider. Okay. So again, that's the basic explanation for the argument. Now you've been practicing argumentative work all semester long. So this part won't really be that difficult for you. However, getting some experience under your belt this semester with a argumentative style topic, like I said, I think will only enhance the way that you anticipate and sort of ease into next semester, which will be all argument based. Okay. So now we're going to do something a little bit different. If you're looking at the schedule today, I said that I was going to pause to talk about Plato's Allegory of the Cave from the Republic, Book 7. And I'm still going to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and do that as part of our discussion of the text. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. Bryce Lynch, you have the right to say. Level 3 check. I don't know about you, but when I originally read this chapter, I was thrown a little bit because I didn't quite understand what Klein was doing. So it was effective. We begin with IOI seemingly arresting Wade, which is such a 180 from where we were at the end of chapter 27, where he essentially announcing that he was going to get to the third gate when the contest would die. And he starts by dropping another sort of 80s reference, 1985 film, The Explorers, with his brother, River Phoenix, and a very young Ethan Hawke, as a group of explorers, teenagers who receive some strange messages from space that show them how to construct this pod. Machine you see here allows them to travel. Directed by Joe Dante, the same guy who directed Howling and Gremlin. And I think Rock and Roll High School. Right, yeah. But basically, Wade's showing the Carter Flashman's video when all sorts of hell just went raining down. Or at least it seems like that. Klein is trying to really build tension by letting Wade's plan take place before he flashes back later to check to reveal what's actually happening. He begins by saying he has a thumbnail of my apartment's building's external security cameras at the edge of my display, so I saw the IOI indentured servant retrieval transport pull up out front, siren wailing like that. Now I thought this bore a little bit of explanation. What is indentured servant? Well, indentured servants were men and women who signed a contract by which they agreed to work for a certain number of years, and they did that so that they could get transportation to America, as well as food, clothing, and shelter. So it's not quite like the system of slavery. However, there were some pretty horrendous conditions to deal with. But these individuals had a formal agreement with wealthy business owners or landowners here in the United States, especially the state of Virginia specifically, right, claiming that they would agree to so many years of labor to pay off a debt that would be paid by a wealthy landowner or by the wealthy business owner in the United States for, as it says here, for their transportation and then housing once they arrive. However, indentured servitude has a long negative history, especially as it relates to England. And one of the key, how would you say this? One of the key people who argued against the last one was Charleston, because under a similar system that existed called the poor law, a poor person or someone who is destitute could not have their livelihood stripped away completely if they were poor and couldn't make up the payment for a bill. They weren't allowed to go bankrupt like they are in the American system. So the recourse is that they were basically sent to a prison, referred to as a workhouse, where they had to work, or a debtor's prison, where they had to work off through manual labor the amount of money that they owed, and then they would be released. So we see something similar to the system returning in the dystopian future of 2045. So Wade's sitting there, and we give another Conan reference. He says, Max, meaning Max Headroom, is artificial intelligence, execute security macro number 1, Brahms, gone with mountain. Of course, Brahm is the mountain god of the Picts, which were the people represented by in the stories of Robert E. Howard. He stalls IOI with a reinforced plate titanium war door, kind of just make their rest of them a little bit more difficult. However, they have these personnel referred to as rock cops who have welding implementation, and they perform what Wade described as a C-section, which you've heard described as a C-section. It's very invasive imagery that's being offered up. And they're led by a IOI representative named Michael Wilson, who explains that he's the credit and collection divisions of IOI, and he says that I'm here because you have failed to make the last 3 payments on your Visa card, which has an outstanding balance in excess of $20,000. Woo! Our records also show that you are currently unemployed and have therefore been classified as impecunious, which simply means having little or no money. So there you go. You can tell someone, I'm currently in a bit of an impecunious state as a student. Right? Most students have very little money, just extra stuff. I hope that's not the case for any of you, but if it is, you can say I'm in a bit of an impecunious state. And they can say, what is impecunious? You can tell them. All right, under current federal law, Wilson explains Wade is now eligible, I like that, for mandatory indenture. I love the juxtaposition and oxymoron of that phrase, ology. Right? You're eligible for mandatory indenture. Eligible is typically something you think about as an opportunity. I'm eligible for having my students eligible. I'm eligible for having a student. Well, now you're eligible for being mandatory forced. Okay, and as they continue to make their way into Wade's department, he gives one last check on the scoreboard, and he notices that Artemis is about 1,000 points ahead of him, and IOI 655321. Anybody remember who that is? Yep, it's Sorrento. Sorrento is actually only 1,000 points behind him. Eight is about the same rate as Sorrento, and then there are a couple of other IOI goons before we get down to Shoto, who is around, what is it, 347,000, even a little bit further down. Forward Wade. He still has a chance to pull ahead, but right now it's actually Artemis. And one of the things we discovered during the arrest is that they're not actually arresting Wade, but rather that Wade has created the conditions for his arrest by posing once again in Bryce. They tear him out of his tactics and leave him for the repost. And he notices that since he was totally naked beneath the tactic suit, they gave him a disposable slate gray jumpsuit with matching plastic shoes. Kind of a rough description. This entire process reminds me of sort of the visual of films like Minority Report, of films like PHS 1138, Fahrenheit 451, or 451. And he says, they put a hooded winter coat on me in the lock. They didn't want me catching pneumonia now that I was a company office of human research. They led me outside and sunlight hit my face for the first time ever happened. That's a really interesting phrase that we get to. Wade also notes that it's snowing and everything is covered in a thin layer of gray ice and slush. I didn't know what the temperature was, he says, but I couldn't remember feeling so cold. The wind cut right to my back. And here is where we want to pause, because up to this point, Wade has been in what I'm calling the cave, referencing the terrible cave, right? So Wade sits in a small space, his apartment building. Here, we're using the visual from his van, his hideout, to reference what's going on. And the light that he receives is from the light generated by the oasis. In a similar sense, Plato's narrative, or parable, describes a great high wall upon which a puppet show has been established. Now, behind that puppet show, there's a fire, and there's a screen that blocks the viewpoint of a bunch of prisoners who are sort of lashed in place, forced to look just at this screen lit by the fire. And they're facing away from the fire toward this wall. So they're sitting locked in place looking at this wall, and the fire casts a shadow across the screen where the puppet show is going on above and behind you. And this becomes all they know of reality. So if you can think about this for a moment, a very similar sort of scenario that purposefully, we don't have to be locked in place to experience this. We experience the same thing anytime we go to a movie theater because a rear projected film is broadcast onto a blank screen, and sounds created by the actors are piped in through the speakers, and the entire experience predicted, thousands of years before um, it actually came into existence. But somehow Plato just made one mistake. He assumed that he would have to be shackled to be forced to watch the images of unreality. Whereas in point of fact, we would do so well as a come to think. And we see that this has only metamorphosized into something like realism, right? It has become something that we choose to do. We choose to self-do rather than look at and interact with the real world around us. And as you can see, Wade writes, I hadn't been out here in the real world for a long time, and I wanted to see how it would change. And compare that to the piece in the speech by Plato. Slowly, his eyes adjust to the light. First, he can only see the shadow. Gradually, though, he can see the reflections of people and things in the water. And then later, he can see the people and things themselves once his eyes adjust to the natural light. So I'm going to stop this for a moment. I'm going to go back to the share screen because, like I said, I want to bring this out. If argument essay share. Nope, it's not. Share screen. Plato's allegory. The translation that we have is by Thomas. And it's told in a couple of different parts. So this is a longer dialogue between Plato and his great student Socrates, and another student named Glaucon. Now I'm not sure if Glaucon it was a real person or not, but there's a good chance that he was because we know that Socrates is a real person. So Plato's teacher, Socrates, is discussing the nature of reality, the nature of learning, and he has so even though Plato's here, he's not talking, he's taking up the mantle of his teacher Socrates. For Socrates' great crime, as it was described, corrupting the youth of that, because amongst other beliefs, he thought that there was only one God, that the gods and goddesses of the Greek mythology were just natural forces being ascribed human condition and fate. And he said, while I do think there is a God, I think it's a larger monotheistic version of God, much in line with what people Judeo-Christian faith, faiths, plural, meaning Judaism, Christianity, and the Muslim faith. how they use that overarching power. Now, that's pretty standard for most of us, even if you don't have a particular belief system. That's totally fine. We're aware of it. It's pretty mundane as a concept. In ancient Greece, it was pretty radical. That's the only point I want to draw out. Is that this was such a dangerous idea that they actually asked Socrates to choose whether he would drink some poison or be put to a more violent death. And Socrates, left with two bad options, chooses the one that he thinks to be the least loyal, and drinks a concoction of wine mixed with a poison herb called hemlock, and he dies surrounded by his students and his friends and family. Not the worst way to go, I suppose, but also not great or less than good. And he begins by setting the scene, explaining the cave of fire. The quickest analogy again is the movie, but it says essentially there are people who are living on the earth, cave-like zone, and it stretches a long way up towards the daylight by them. The people have been in this dwelling since their childhood, and they've been shackled by their legs and necks. They stay in the same place so that there is only one thing for them to look at, whatever they encounter in front of them. But because they're shackled, they're unable to turn their heads around and see what happens. And there's a fire supply, and a wall raised between the fire and the food. Some light is allowed for them, namely fire that casts its glow towards them above and at some distance away. Between the fire and those who are shackled, there is a walkway at a certain height. Now imagine that a low wall is built along the length of this walkway, like a curtain over the puppeteer's way that they show against the face of the. So now imagine all along this low wall, people are carrying all sorts of things that reach up higher to the wall. Statues, carvings, stone, wood, and many other artifacts. As you expect, some of them are crossing each other as they walk. And as often, the other students say, this is the usual picture. These are some unusual things. Socrates explains they're very much like humans. So what are they seeing here? Socrates explains, well, what do you think? In the beginning, people like this have never managed, whether on their own or with the help of others, to see anything besides shadows that are continually projecting a wall opposite the glow of the fire. So reality is limited, in other words, to what it is we see. And in many ways, wage reality is limited to the ways he perceives the oasis and how it is contradictory of the experience that he lives out in reality. Glaucon says, how could it be otherwise? It's of course to keep their heads immobile for their entire lives. And Socrates agrees. And what do they see in the things that are being carried behind them? Do they not simply see the shadows of those images? Glaucon says, yeah, that's the way it has to be. Now, if they were able to say something about what they saw and talk over, do you think they would regard that which they saw as well, saw the wall of beings? And they would have to, naturally. And what if this person also had an echo reverberating off the wall in front of them, the one they always look at? And whenever one of the people walking behind those chains and carrying the things would make a sound, don't you think they would imagine the speaker was anyone other than the shadow that passed in front of them? And then Glaucon says, yeah, nothing else. And then Socrates says, well, in all, those who chained would consider nothing besides the shadows of the artifacts as the Glaucon says that would have to absolutely be the truth. And there's a really cool video about this. You can research on YouTube in your own time that will explain more of this. And what's interesting is that eventually, they said, let's suppose now that a prisoner got free from this condition. And at first, he would, as I said earlier, his eyesight would be poor when he escaped the upper reaches of society. First, he would only see shadows of things because he was so used to dim light and fire. It's like anytime you go out of a movie theater on a bright day, you're blitzed, right? You see the images of reality as less focused because you've been spending so much time focusing on non-reality. And he said that once that prisoner was freed, he was able to first focus on the shadows and the reflections of him, himself. He would think it was wonderful, and he would, having experienced this level of wonderment, certainly be compelled to go back and free his fellow prisoners. But Socrates says, when he goes back and tries to free his fellow prisoners, they would laugh at him and mock him for something that they knew to be from their experience, their perception of reality, not the truth. They know that's not the truth. There was light, birds, people walking on the field. That's not real. What's real is right down here in the cave where we've always been. That's the nature of reality. The point being, of course, that the nature of reality is just what we suspect it is, or what we are conditioned to believe. And I think that's a running theme that Kern is trying to replace itself. Okay, level 3, chapter 29, welcome to technical expert. In this chapter, Wade aces the OASIS software test once he's inducted into the OASIS Center, but he fails the Halliday and Uology component on purpose. He explains that he didn't want to get placed in the Uology division since there was a chance he might run into Sorrento. Now, he's lost a lot of weight, and he said that there was a good chance Sorrento wouldn't have even noticed him anyway, but why take an extra risk? He's awarded the position of an OASIS Technical Support Representative, level 2, and would be paid $38,500 a year. Which doesn't sound a bad deal, really, except that amount of money is, from that amount of pay, rather, is subtracted the cost of his housing, his meals, his taxes, medical, dental, optical, and recreation services. Right? His avatar is recreated for all of which are deducted automatically. The remaining income is your life and debt. He explains the vicious cycle of how this works. Now, in the film adaptation, this is all described or explained away as the fate of Artemis' father. So, in the novel, Wade experiences this firsthand, and the film adaptation, Artemis, explains that this was the fate that awaited her own father. He says that once my debt was paid in full, I would be released from. At that time, based on my job performance, it was possible I'd be offered a permanent position with IOI. But this was a complete joke, of course. Index were never able to pay up their debt. So they get sick and they die all in the service of IOI. But again, Wade in the film adaptation, and it was see Samantha placed in the same position, Artemis rather placed in the same position. But there's a twist because the indenturement contract appears in the window of Wade's display, and he scrolls down to the bottom without buying it. It was over 600 pages long. Oops, that's a little dig at you and me and everybody else who signed up with the cell phone contract. Scroll to the bottom. We probably should take some more time to read, but they make it so long and complex that many of us don't bother. And we just feel position or vulnerable to many. unfair business. I signed the name Bryce Lynch and verified my signature with a record. So he's not waiting between us. It's Bryce who's actually been nothing specific. Even though I was using a fake name, I wondered if the contract might still be legally binding. I wasn't sure, and I really didn't care because I had a plan, and this was part of it. So we have Chapter 30 here from Level 3, courtesy violation. And again, everybody is stamped with one of these strange ear tags, which is obviously an allusion to the THX 1138. And he says that doing tech support for IOI as an indentured servant is nothing like working from home. And here I couldn't watch these play games or listen while answering an endless stream of the name calls. He said I fell asleep 5 separate times during my shift. And each time the system saw I was just off, it sounded a warning klaxon, joking with it. I was now being issued 2 little red pills each day to help me stay awake. And I took them too, but not until after I got off work. So what is he up to? He says, about 7 months later, I obtained a set of IOI intranet passwords from a hack server, the same black market data auction site where purchase information is completely identity. I've been browsing through the warehouse auction listings, and one in particular caught my eye. IOI intranet access backdoors and system exploits. The seller claimed to be offering classified proprietary information on IOI's internet architecture, along with a series of administrative access codes and system exploits that could give a user carte blanche inside the company. So this is similar to online warehouses and things like the Silk Road, which were used to promote criminality and purchase of dubious goods. I think sometimes guns and illicit drugs, all online. The Silk Road, of course, has been shut down now, or a version of it may still exist, but it's pretty much impossible to access unless you have a Tor engine in the first place. And you probably don't want to do that. You probably don't want to illicit goods. But I'm just using it as a real world example of a virtual black market that it's also a reference to the idea that you can use the prevalence of hacking culture, which uses internet connection. I'm not an expert on this thing, but basically an internet is a specific internet that's accessed within a particular industry or business. Right? The college has an internet, because the college environment that allows for various levels of access. Obviously, as students, you don't have access to all of it I do, and vice versa. But system administrator for the Dishwasher College probably could get into material if they need, but it has to be trusted. So Wade has snuck into IOI to perform an appropriate estimate, sort of take them out of the news from it. So that focused on isolating the data related to Castle Interact, because after all, if you remember, Planet Doom or Tritonia is the home to Castle Interact, which is currently under control of the Sixers. And the force is that is isolating data related to it, the forces the Sixers position around it. I also snagged all the data I could find on the orbit Ossibox, which was used, remember, to put a force field around the castle. That would prevent anyone except the Sixers from gaining access. So he says, from what I could tell, the Sixers still hadn't figured out how to open the third gate. Simply inserting the key into the keyhole had no effect. They'd had their entire team trying to figure out why for several days, but they still hadn't made progress. I opened the threat assessment folder next, and when I saw what was inside, I felt the blood drain from my face. There are 5 folders, and they're all labeled as various members of my life, except the guy who had marked them. So he pulls up Artemis's school photo, and he said he was surprised that she looked basically identical to her avatar, with one small difference, which is that most of the left half of the face was covered with a red, purplish birthmark. You can see this photo of a young lady, not Artemis, not the actress who played her, but someone with what's referred to as port wine. Again, on the left half of the face. So this is essentially kind of what Artemis might look like in reality. We also find out that her real name is Samantha Evelyn Cook, 20-year-old Canadian citizen, 5'7" tall, and contains her home address, 2206 Greenleaf Lane in Vancouver, British Columbia, with a picture of her home. So it is an average size suburban house, along with lots of other information like the fact that she lives in the next checks Shoto's file. They knew his real name, Akieta Karatsu, and it also appeared to have his home address, an apartment building in Osaka, Japan. And he described a thin, stoic, with a shaved head. But H's files are a little different. First of all that's listed there is a fake name, an alias from the movie Big Trouble in China. Henry Swanson is my name, and then my name. Just a screenshot of his avatar and an address listed as mobile. Daito's file, of course, suggests that he committed suicide, or at least there were links to articles that suggested that. His real name is Toshiro Yoshaki, along with his home address. But we know, of course, that Wade has had some experience in how IOI can manipulate media, just as they described that his aunt's trailer had been destroyed by meth lab explosion, and really it was a bomb purposely planted by IOI in an attempt to try to kill Wade. Okay, so that leads us to level 3, chapter 31, mission. Very possible Wade escapes by simply using his access code to gather all this information. And he says when he's all done, he pulls up his indenture profile and basically zeroes out his outstanding balance. He does explain the money he never had. And then he selected the indenture serving observation communications tag, control, his ear tag here, and then he disabled the locking mechanism in both places. This does lead to a slight problem, and then his ear is hidden, which he later call out. So he goes into the bathroom. But in the meantime, ear is used to carry cover, and Wade is able to pull off his visor and gloves, and he finds a vacuum sealed maintenance technique with a cap and ID badge, which he was requested by submitting an internet form and had them delivered to an empty cubicle on the floor. Harry Tuttle was the name, and he printed out the maintenance tech ID badge, which gave him complete access to the entire building. He reprogrammed his identity encrypt to work as an ID security. So again, this is a big reference to Robert De Niro's character from the 1985 film Brazil, during the Terry Gilliam. So it's another reference for those of you who are paying attention. But once he escapes, we see him out in the real world. He takes a cab to an old Their other physical materials are sort of left. The few physical things that can be purchased on the Oasis are left in these sort of strip malls, as he says. And he walks out of IOI and purchases a body armor, a gun, and some mace for his own personal protection from a franchise named Mendel. And then he walks into an Oasis parlor located a few blocks away, which was a franchise version called The Plug, with a reputation for high prices and outdated hardware, but connections that were supposed to be fast, reliable, and lag-free. This reminds me of the phenomenon of people visiting stores like McDonald's and other open Wi-Fi resources. People buy coffee, just by the presence, and in order to be online with all that, they use up that free Wi-Fi, so they don't have to use it. Or they'll upload heavy streams of content through these businesses that pay for Wi-Fi. And you see that same thing sort of going on. And that leads us to a reconnection at the end of chapter 32. And level 3, chapter 32 sort of wraps up with this notion of faith, hope, and charity. First of all, Wade makes a appointment with the remainder of the high five in the basement stage of H's noon, and he explains to them that the Sixers haven't figured out how to score, but he has. And he says there's a keyhole in the very center of the crystal door, crystal gate, and directly above it there are 3 words etched into the surface: faith, hope, and charity. And the other ventures immediately say, okay, these have no terms. And we just say them in reverse order and then sing them. And we get the gospel according to Schoolhouse Rock, right? Which is that faith, hope, and charity reversed as lyrics to the classic church song, Please Be Nice. So essentially, they said, you people, you have to put the key open this. But in order to drive it, we're going to have to get into gasoline rack concept. So he sends out a call for help to all of them across the world, essentially calling them to arms so that IOI cannot unfairly steal away the entire context from the rest of the world. And they say, okay, well, that may work, but what do we do in the meantime? How do we compete with the IOI goons when we're going to be constantly hunted in the real world as we're trying to save the virtual world? And a mysterious voice issues from nowhere, and it says, I think I may be Ogden Morrow, who has been watching the after the high five and was actually responsible for the conflict getting knocked over earlier in the novel by accident. He asks, have any of you been to Oregon? It's lovely. So the high five make preparations to head to Oregon to meet up with Ogden Morrow so that they can be physically entrenched from the safety of his home as they attempt to take back the Oasis, which we'll discuss next time. All right. So that's it for this week. I want to thank you very much, as always, for your time and your attention. And I will just implore you, as always, to think critically, to keep reading, and to do the best that you can with the writing. I'll see you next time. Take care, all. study player